A zoo under fire for shooting and killing an endangered gorilla instead of tranquilizing him. After the animal dragged a child around its enclosure, the child had fallen into that enclosure.
Today, I'm going to tell you about 5 very disturbing zoo animal attacks that were caught on camera. But the final story might be the most terrifying of them all, because in that case, the barriers didn't matter. So you'll definitely want to stick around for that. Before we start, these moments were all captured live. In most of these cases, the people watching had no idea what was about to happen until it was already too late. I post stories like this a few times a week. If you're drawn to strange, dark, and unsettling moments caught on camera, consider subscribing. And tonight, turn the lights down. Let's begin. In the mid-2000s, the Taipei Zoo in Taiwan was a popular destination for families and tourists. One of its biggest attractions was the lion habitat, home to several massive African lions that visitors could watch safely from behind barriers. Among them was a 300-pound male lion and a female companion, 2 powerful predators capable of killing large animals in seconds. Normally, the viewing area was calm. People stood behind the railings, took photos, and watched the lions resting in the sun. But on one afternoon, visitors suddenly noticed something that made no sense. A man had climbed over the barrier and dropped directly into the lion enclosure. The man was later identified as 46-year-old Zhang Ho Chan. Witnesses watched in disbelief as he walked toward the lions and removed his jacket. Then he began waving it in front of the animals, almost like a matador taunting a bull. At first, the lions just watched him, but moments later, the massive male lion charged forward. With a single swipe, the lion knocked the jacket out of Chan's hands. The crowd screamed as the lion struck again. This time, the animal bit and mauled him, dragging him across the ground. What shocked witnesses most was that Chan didn't run. Even after the attack, he stayed inside the enclosure, barely reacting as the predator circled him again. Zoo officials quickly realized the situation was becoming critical. Staff debated whether to tranquilize the lions or even the man himself, but the tranquilizers take time to work, and no one knew how the animals would react in the meantime. Instead, they tried something desperate. Workers blasted the lions with high-pressure fire hoses while veterinarians fired tranquilizer darts. One dart finally struck the male lion, but the female lion suddenly charged toward Chan, sending the crowd into panic. Only the force of the fire hose managed to scare her back long enough for police to negotiate with the injured man. Eventually, Chan slowly limped toward the service gate and escaped the enclosure. Both lions were safely tranquilized and survived the incident. Chan suffered deep bite wounds and severe injuries, but lived. Later, he admitted he'd been abusing alcohol and amphetamines and hearing voices before the incident. He spent a month in psychiatric care, where doctors helped him recover and begin treatment. But for many people who watched the footage, the most disturbing part wasn't the lions. It was the moment a man willingly stepped into the territory of 2 predators and simply waited to see what would happen. But as disturbing as that incident was, at least the danger began with a man who chose to enter the enclosure. In the next case, the situation was very different, because this time it wasn't an adult making a reckless decision. It was a small child who somehow ended up inside one of the most powerful primate enclosures in the world. And within seconds, a 400-pound silverback gorilla was standing over him. In 2016, the Cincinnati Zoo in Ohio was like any other busy zoo on a warm spring afternoon. Families walked along the pathways. Children pressed their faces against the glass exhibits. And visitors gathered around one of the most popular enclosures, the gorilla habitat. Inside that enclosure lived a 17-year-old western lowland gorilla named Harambe. He was a massive silverback, weighing over 400 pounds. But zookeepers described him as calm and curious. Most days, visitors simply watched him walk around the habitat or sit quietly near the water moat. On May 28th, hundreds of people were standing around the enclosure, enjoying a normal day at the zoo. But then, something happened that no one expected. Near the viewing barrier, a small 3-year-old boy had been watching the gorillas with his family. At one point, the child said he wanted to go inside the enclosure. At first, the adults nearby didn't take it seriously. It sounded like something many children say at the zoo. But moments later, the crowd suddenly heard shouting, because somehow the child had slipped past the barriers and fallen nearly 15 feet into the gorilla habitat below. The moment the boy landed inside the enclosure, the atmosphere changed instantly. Visitors began screaming and pointing as Harambe approached the child. Cell phones came out. Cameras started recording. The massive gorilla reached the boy and grabbed his clothing. For a moment, it looked as if Harambe was examining him, almost curious. But then, Harambe began dragging the child through the shallow water of the enclosure while the crowd panicked above. And the longer it continued, the more dangerous the situation became.
A zoo under fire for shooting and killing an endangered gorilla instead of tranquilizing him. After the animal dragged a child around its enclosure, the child had fallen into that enclosure.
Zoo officials were watching the situation unfold through security cameras. One zookeeper later explained that a silverback gorilla of Harambe's size could easily kill a human child without meaning to. Even a single accidental movement could be fatal. And with the crowd screaming and the gorilla becoming increasingly agitated, the decision had to be made quickly. Within minutes, the zoo's dangerous animal response team arrived. They had two options. They could attempt to tranquilize Harambe, or they could stop the situation immediately. But tranquilizers take time to work. And during that time, Harambe could react unpredictably. So, the team made a decision. A single shot rang out across the enclosure. Harambe collapsed. The boy survived. But the moment the footage spread online, the story exploded across the world. What made the incident so disturbing wasn't just the chaos captured on camera. It was the uncomfortable truth that followed. Many experts later said Harambe never actually tried to harm the child. Some believed he might have even been trying to protect him from the screaming crowd. But because the child had entered the enclosure, the zoo had no safe alternative. The boy was rescued and recovered. Harambe was gone. And to this day, people still argue about who was truly responsible that afternoon. The zoo, the parents, or a moment that never should have happened in the first place. The Harambe incident shocked people around the world, and it forced zoos everywhere to rethink safety barriers and visitor behavior. But sometimes, even when people follow the rules, the danger can still escape the enclosure. Because in the next case, one of the most powerful predators in the zoo did something investigators never expected. It climbed out, and suddenly, the animal everyone had come to watch was hunting people inside the park. On Christmas Day in 2007, the San Francisco Zoo was crowded with holiday visitors. Families walked through the park, children gathered near animal exhibits, and one of the most visited areas was the big cat enclosure. Inside that habitat lived a Siberian tiger named Tatiana. Tatiana was powerful, fast, and capable of jumping incredible heights. But zoo officials believed the enclosure walls were tall enough to keep her contained. For years, they had been, until that night. Late in the afternoon, several visitors were standing near the tiger enclosure when they suddenly heard shouting.
What do we see here? ferocious tigers that look at little girls and they want to eat.
Oh,
He's coming closer.
They're probably soft, Daddy.
I think they're soft with big teeth.
Then, witnesses noticed something that didn't make sense. Tatiana was no longer inside the enclosure. Somehow, the tiger had climbed over the wall and entered the zoo walkway. Within moments, chaos spread through the area. The tiger charged toward a group of young men who'd been standing nearby. One of them was knocked to the ground almost instantly. Visitors began running in every direction while emergency calls flooded into police dispatch. By the time officers arrived, the situation had already turned deadly. Investigators later discovered that the enclosure wall was several feet lower than recommended safety standards for Siberian tigers. Tatiana had simply climbed out.
If you had asked me the day before, was it adequate for holding animals, I would have told you yes. Obviously, it wasn't.
One young man died from the attack. 2 others were severely injured before police located the tiger and shot her. The incident became one of the deadliest zoo attacks in modern history. And for many people, the most chilling part wasn't how the attack happened. It was how quickly a normal zoo visit turned into something no one inside the park could escape. When Tatiana escaped her enclosure, the entire zoo became a danger zone. Visitors had no warning, no way to prepare. But the next incident is disturbing for a completely different reason, because this time, the animal never escaped. The barriers worked exactly as they were supposed to. The only problem was the person who decided to cross them. In March of 2019, the Wildlife World Zoo in Arizona was busy with weekend visitors. The park's known for its close-view animal exhibits, where people can walk along pathways that bring them within a few feet of the world's most dangerous predators. One of the most popular stops was the jaguar enclosure. Inside lived a powerful female jaguar named Handy. Like most big cats, she spent most of the day pacing slowly along the edge of her habitat, occasionally approaching the fence where visitors stood watching. Normally, people kept their distance. But that afternoon, one visitor decided she wanted something more memorable than just watching. A woman in her early 30s approached the enclosure with her phone in hand. Instead of standing behind the barrier, like everyone else, she climbed over the protective railing that was meant to keep visitors safely away from the fence. At first, nearby visitors thought she was just leaning forward for a better picture. But then she raised her phone, turned her back to the enclosure, and tried to take a selfie with the jaguar behind her. And for a moment, it looked like nothing was going to happen until the jaguar suddenly moved. Within seconds, the big cat sprinted across the enclosure and slammed against the fence. Through the gaps in the enclosure, the jaguar reached out with its paw and grabbed the woman's arm. What happened next was caught on video by several people nearby. The woman screamed as the jaguar's claws dug into her arm, pulling her toward the fence. Blood began running down her arm as the animal refused to let go. Visitors nearby shouted for her to pull away, and for a terrifying moment, it looked like the jaguar might drag her closer. One witness later told reporters that everything happened in seconds. He said the woman kept repeating that she just wanted a photo. Zoo staff rushed to the enclosure and tried to distract the jaguar, while others pulled the woman back over the railing. One visitor reportedly threw a water bottle toward the enclosure to get the animal's attention.
Until she got the water bottle and distracted it, and it unclasped except for her sweater, then we were able to pull her off.
Eventually, the jaguar released her grip, but the damage had already been done. The woman collapsed on the ground with deep lacerations across her arm. Paramedics later said she had narrowly avoided far more serious injuries.
The jaguar will not be euthanized. We do not hold the jaguar responsible for what happened, and it has been concluded that the injuries were caused due to human error.
But when zoo officials reviewed what happened, they discovered something important. The jaguar had never left its enclosure. The barriers had worked exactly as designed. The only reason the attack happened was because the visitor had crossed the safety line meant to protect her. The woman survived after receiving medical treatment for severe claw wounds, but the video of the attack...
The woman sustained lacerations to her left arm, but is expected to make a full recovery. The Wildlife World Zoo says the jaguar was never out of its enclosure and says, quote, "We can promise you nothing will happen to our jaguar."
Quickly spread online, sparking another global debate about zoo safety. Some people blame the zoo for allowing visitors to get so close to dangerous animals. But the zoo responded with a simple statement: the jaguar would not be punished, because the animal had done exactly what wild predators do when something enters their territory. And if anything made the footage unsettling, it was how quickly a single decision, just a few steps over a railing, turned a simple photo into something far more dangerous. The jaguar attack showed how quickly a single bad decision can turn a normal zoo visit into a terrifying moment. But sometimes the danger comes from the other side of the barrier, and sometimes the animal decides to cross it. And in the final story, that is exactly what happened. Because one summer afternoon in the Netherlands, a massive silverback gorilla did something zoo officials believed was impossible. He escaped, and within seconds, the entire zoo was running for their lives. In 2007, Rotterdam Zoo in the Netherlands was one of the most visited zoos in Europe. Families filled the walkways, children gathered near the glass viewing areas, and one of the biggest attractions was the gorilla exhibit. Inside lived a large silverback gorilla named Bokito. Like many dominant males, Bokito was powerful and territorial, weighing over 400 pounds. Visitors often watched him from behind thick glass walls or across a wide protective moat that surrounded the enclosure. Zoo officials believed the barriers were more than enough to keep visitors safe. For years, they had been, but on one summer afternoon, that assumption would suddenly collapse. Several visitors later said they noticed Bokito behaving strangely that day. Instead of sitting calmly like he often did, he was pacing near the edge of the enclosure. At first, people thought nothing of it, but then Bokito ran toward the moat and jumped. Within seconds, the enormous gorilla had cleared the protective barrier that was supposed to keep him contained. And suddenly, the animal that visitors were supposed to watch from a safe distance was standing in the middle of the zoo walkway. Panic spread instantly. Visitors began screaming and running in every direction as Bokito charged through the crowd. Then, the gorilla focused on one person, a woman who'd been visiting the enclosure frequently and often made eye contact with him through the glass. Witnesses watched in horror as Bokito grabbed her and dragged her across the ground. The attack lasted several terrifying moments. Zoo staff later said Bokito had become agitated after repeated eye contact with the same visitor. In gorilla behavior, direct staring can be interpreted as a challenge. And when Bokito escaped his enclosure, he appeared to recognize her immediately. By the time staff managed to tranquilize Bokito, the woman had suffered over 100 bite wounds and multiple broken bones. Several other visitors were injured during the chaos as people tried to escape. Miraculously, the woman survived after months of medical treatment. Bokito was returned to his enclosure, but the incident forced zoos around the world to reconsider something many visitors had never thought about. Even when a barrier exists, and even when the animal appears calm, you are still standing only a few feet away from one of the most powerful creatures on Earth. The Bokito rampage proved how terrifying it can be when a powerful animal escapes into a crowd. Moments like these are a reminder that even in places designed to be safe, The animals we watch are still powerful wild predators. And when something goes wrong, whether it's a broken barrier, a bad decision, or just a moment of chaos, the results can be terrifying. If you found these stories disturbing, you should check out the next video on the channel where I cover the 4 most disturbing live TV moments caught on camera. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.